Hi, welcome to Wealth Management 4, the show that talks about how to implement wealth management services into your accounting firm. I'm your host, Rory Henry, Director of Business Development at Arrowroot Family Office. I'm with Rob Santos, CEO of Arrowroot Family Office. Rob, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Rory. Thank you. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I cannot complain. Okay, great. Then today's episode, we're going to touch on licensing and compliance basics. We'll talk about the three different levels of licensing: one, outsource; two, partner; three, in-house RIA. We'll also talk about how to get started with licensing, and then also touch on our technology partners in the estate planning and life insurance space that take on those licensing and compliance requirements, so you don't necessarily need to get licensed to offer those services.
Perfect. Let's do it.
All right. So can you start out and talk about licensing requirements to offer wealth management services?
Absolutely. So this is, this conversation is one that usually really frightens a lot of accountants because the idea or the potential that there might be licensing compliance requirements that are already on top of all of the requirements that CPAs already have is daunting. And so today we're going to talk a lot about demystifying that and showing that there are some very simple solutions to take care of this, in addition to potentially getting licensed or bringing that RIA solution in-house. But that is not necessary in a lot of different aspects, which we're going to cover in this presentation.
Great, Rob. And let's start out and let's tackle one of the main services, which is investment advisory. What it needs to be done from a licensing perspective to offer that service?
Absolutely. So, there's a few different ways. We talked about historically the idea of a broker at a broker dealer that's making a commission off of a sale. So, for this conversation, given that we're not really, trying to guide people towards that type of relationship, we think the fiduciary manner is a much stronger and better business case. But if you did want to go down that road, you do need to get licensed with a broker dealer. You probably have to pass some kind of test, be that a Series 7 or a 65 or a 66 or a 6, depending on what you're selling. But let's just take that out of our brains and put it over to the side, because we really are not advising folks to get involved in that, especially at the beginning of starting to implement some of these services. If you're doing an outsourced model, so let's talk about that first, you may not need to be licensed at all. The requirements, the fiduciary standard, the compliance network that needs to be in place on that, you're relying on that third party to provide all of that. And you are simply a solicitor or a referral source. And we're going to cover this. A lot of states, all that requires is filing a form to say that and disclosing that to the clients. If you're partnering with an RIA, and maybe it's with clients that are in states that require some kind of license, you might have to get a Series 65 in order to do that. Not a super complicated test. Folks that have gotten their CPA, that's a much, much more difficult test. We know people are capable of being able to pass that test. And if you're going to bring it in-house, you certainly need to get a Series 65 to be a registered investment advisor. But there's much more responsibilities than just having that Series 65. You need to have a really robust compliance program in place if you're going to bring it in-house. So again, like we've talked about through the whole program, there are different levels of licensing requirements that you would have to utilize, and some of them are not very difficult at all.
Great, Rob. So let's go on to the next licensing topic, which is estate planning. And what do you need as far as licensing to offer that service? And then maybe touch obviously on our technology provider.
Sure. So if you are going to prepare and advise, give legal advice, you need to be a lawyer. You need to be licensed in that state. And for most people that are on this call, they may not be lawyers, and estate law may not be something that they want to directly advise in. Again, we want to try to show that there are pathways to give some general advice without having to take on that full responsibility, that full compliance obligation. So by partnering with one of the technological platforms that we currently utilize at Arrow Family Office, folks such as trustandwills.com or Vanilla, really what you're doing is maybe gathering some key information, helping to guide the client to input that information about some ways to think about it, and then you're inputting it onto the platform. The platform then takes that responsibility to guide the client and thus takes on that licensing and regulatory requirements as far as being a lawyer licensed in that state.
Great, yeah, and from an estate planning service, you're not required to be an attorney. If you go through our technology partner, they provide a local attorney that will speak to the client and go over the estate planning documents. So that's a license that's not required, but a service that you'll be able to provide in this holistic wealth management strategy. All right, great, Robin. Let's talk about life insurance. What is needed to get life insurance services offered to a client? I know we've spoken about our technology providers that have no commission insurance. So let's touch on that license requirement.
Absolutely. And this ties in to the previous conversation of either doing it in a suitability broker-dealer type of relationship where you're getting commission. And what we're really focusing on is that fiduciary standard, non-commission, but being able to charge for your advice. And so by, again, utilizing some of these third parties, one, you can be able to take care of your fiduciary duty. The second is that with some of these life insurance products that may have assets in them, so cash values that can be invested, you can be paid on investment advisory fees on those assets within the life insurance policy. And we think that really just aligns everybody's interests much better because if people need very simple term, you are not going to get commission off of that. But you're also, your client knows that you're not trying to push them into esoteric vehicles because you're going to get some kind of commission. You're really being able to charge on your advice in some of the assets that may be in some of these policies, and utilizing these third parties to give, unbiased fiduciary standard type of advice. So in the same instance of an RIA, where there are different levels, maybe you don't need to be licensed because of a specific state, or if you have a client in a state that requires licensing, you would only really need your Series 65 in order to be able to be compensated if assets are being managed within a life insurance policy. Now, the last thing I would say is that for adding some of that service, we've seen people be able to charge, some fees and just ascertaining, doing some planning around their insurance, which you are able to do as long as you're not getting commission on those insurance policies. So there is a few different ways that you can be able to build this into your practice so that it's profitable for you.
Yeah, so it sounds like when we spoke about it in other episodes, is getting the documentation together, facilitating these other services allows you to charge money for an advisory type of model fee.
Exactly. And planning, it ties back in. So some people will say, well, most of my clients are in term insurance, and that probably can't be made better. And so how am I going to make that a part of my practice that, helps to make me a better advisor and also increases my revenue? And the answer is that's just one aspect of advisory that can come into your tax planning strategies or your financial planning strategies, which you can charge a fee for. So it's making you a better advisor. It's giving you more tools in your toolbox. And there's a lot of flexibility on the ways that you can be able to be compensated on that. And we really encourage anyone that's interested in that to reach out to us so that we can be able to try to walk you through what might be the best situation for you and your firm.
Great, Rob. And let's talk about how to get started. And let's break it down to, how to get started outsourcing and partnering, and then also how to get started as an RIA.
Sure. So, the first step of outsourcing. So, if you're outsourcing, you can partner with a registered investment advisor such as Arrowroot, or maybe an existing advisor that you have a relationship with, and talk to them about where some of your clients may be, what states they may be, and you need to have the conversation with them. Probably have to fill out one form to be registered as what's called a solicitor. And in these states that don't require licensing, that's pretty much it. So we can help guide you on how the best way to approach that with advisors that you're currently working with, or with us. In the kind of more partnering aspect, where maybe you want to have your firm's logo on some of these things, you want to do part of that advisement. Again, depending on where your clients may be and what kind of work you're doing versus the investment advisor, you may not need registration. But in a lot of instances, it makes sense to be able to get to be covered in multiple states, and also allow you to take on some more of that advisory role. The third option of bringing the full RIA in-house certainly requires some licensing, Series 65. But in addition to that, we advise everyone to partner with or hire either a compliance firm or a consultant. We have multiple different resource partners that we can be able to introduce to walk you through what that compliance really takes to actually bring that RIA in-house. And again, like we cover in all of these episodes, we really think that starting with the outsource model, working towards a hybrid, and then ultimately maybe going to the RIA in-house is a wonderful path to go, because it allows you the time and opportunity to see what you really want to do, what really matches with your business, without having to spend time and resources, maybe trying to bring a full RIA in-house too soon.
Now, Rob, let's talk about just briefly the difference between a state registration and an SEC registration if you are becoming a registered investment advisor.
Sure. So, if a registered investment advisor manages under $100 million, it is mandated that they need to be registered with the state where they are domiciled. And in some instances, they need to be registered in other states where they have clients in other states. Now, some states have a number of clients that they will allow you to have before you get registered. So, for example, New York, if you're a California-based firm like Arrow Family Offices, but you have less than 5 clients in New York, you don't need to register in New York. But when you get over that 5 hurdle, you'd have to register in New York as well. The nice thing is that once you get over $100 million, you can register with the SEC, which gives you blanket registration across all 50 states. And you're only dealing with the SEC. You're not having to deal with the multiple states. So, it is something to consider. If you're a firm that you believe that you can raise over $100 million relatively quickly to get to that SEC status, then that can be very attractive. If you have clients that are kind of spread all over, but you don't have $100 million under assets, and it would require you to register in various states, it might be a better idea to either outsource or partner to start with.
Great, Rob. And then from a compliance perspective, what do firms need to know, when they're outsourcing or partnering with a wealth manager like ourselves?
Absolutely. So, if you are partnering or outsourcing some of this, we really encourage you to get to know that firm, deeper on a compliance network and process and their processes as well, because they ultimately are the ones that are going to be acting as that fiduciary, either with you or being outsourced by you to them, your clients to them. So, you really want to get to know what is in place there. A lot of public information available on firms, either through FINRA website or the SEC's website. You can see if there's been any regulatory problems with them or disciplinary action. Some of these things are really, really, really important to be able to review before you enter into one of these relationships with an investment advisor. And then, the other things that you want to know is, a big buzzword now is cybersecurity. So, how are they securing your client's data? How do they use it? How do they make sure that it's properly being used and safe? Some of these are some great initial questions. And if for folks that are interested in taking the next step and doing one of these things, we'll schedule some time with you to go over some best practices, either by working with someone like ourselves at Arrowroot or somebody that you already have a relationship with.
Absolutely, Rob. So I just wanted to kind of illustrate the picture here of what's required licensing wise. If you take our family office model, we are registered investment advisors, or if you're partnering in getting the Series 65 license, you'll be able to offer estate planning through a technology partner that will guide you through, and they supply a local attorney. And then from life insurance, we have a technology partner that allows you to offer commission-free insurance, so you don't need to get a life insurance license.
Absolutely.
Okay, great, Rob. And let's just finish up here and provide the audience with an illustration of what's needed for each of the pathways to provide these services and what licenses are needed for each.
Absolutely. So, we'll go from the less burdensome, less complex to the most burdensome and most complex. And so starting with the less difficult lift would be the outsource model. So outsourcing to someone like Arrowroot Family Office, which is SEC registered, has all of the compliance in place, partnerships, technology put into place to really carry that compliance and licensing burden, may require maybe filling out a solicitor form. The partnership model, certainly you may need to do a solicitor form or have to get a Series 65. Certainly also dependent on which states your clients may reside. And then the RIA model, which is bringing fully in-house, would be the most difficult of these three, which doesn't just require licensing a Series 65, but also requires someone being a chief compliance officer and having a compliance program put into place to make sure that you're compliant on an ongoing basis. So we can help guide any firm that's really interested in pursuing any or potentially all of these different options on the best practices and the easiest way to get started.
Great, Rob. And let's just talking about how to get started. We always say start small. So you may want to pick one of these services and pick a wealth management partner, whether that's Arrowroot or an existing partner, to start working with some clients to providing these wealth management services.
Absolutely.
All right.
And as we've discussed in the past, just getting started with some services that can be value add to your clients and that you can be able to provide, with as least amount of burden to your time and your resources and your team is the best way to go. But again, the best way to get started with that, we would say reach out, and we're happy to be able to give you as much guidance as we can.
Great, Rob. I appreciate you going over licensing and compliance.
Anytime.
All right. You have a great day.
You too. Thanks, Rory.